Hello, hello. Welcome to At Home with the Intuitive Cook, the podcast giving a voice to everyday home cooks like you and me. Join me around the kitchen table as we chat about finding cooking ease and inspiration beyond rules and recipes and the noise of celebrity chef culture. It's not rocket science, it's just dinner. Hello, hello. Welcome to episode 11. I'm KATERINA Pavlakis, also known as the Intuitive Cook, and I'm sharing the kitchen table today at home with Sophia Maslowski. A lover of food, flowers, life and beauty, Sophia lives in rural Canada, and she's also a holistic health coach. We serendipitously found each other on social media when we discovered that we both speak the same intuitive language in the kitchen. She's as passionate about tasty, uncomplicated, home-cooked food as I am, and our spirited conversation covers a lot of ground, from the philosophical to the practical and much in between. Let's get into it. Hello, Sophia. So great to have you on the podcast.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Yeah, this has been a long time coming. We've had quite a few conversations already over on Instagram and what have you. So I know you are someone who loves cooking. So do you remember actually learning to cook?
I mean, I don't remember anybody actually, teaching me specifically how to cook, but I remember, being in the kitchen quite often when I was young and feeling very familiar in that space and being drawn to that space overall. So the usual kind of childlike memories of having a chair up against the counter and standing up there and receiving a piece of dough from mom and rolling it out and playing with it while she makes the actual baked goods, and then we throw in our weird looking thing and get all excited. And yeah, I'd say those are maybe more like the more vivid memories of my younger age. But I remember also too, just kind of, like I say, getting very comfortable in the kitchen very early on. For example, my mom didn't really love being in the kitchen. Even now, like I'm actually staying with her at the moment. I know she always loves it when I take over the kitchen, for example, and make the meals and everything. So, and I started doing that from probably about age 10. I remember baking a cake for my sister's birthday. She was turning 8. And that's probably one of my big, fun, vivid memories of being in the kitchen and just it totally being my thing. And I made a cake for her in the shape of an 8 and iced it and decorated it. And that was one of my earliest, proudest moments in the kitchen. But then even after that, I got comfortable with making dinners and getting very kind of like, pragmatic about meals and making sure they were balanced and having the right, combination of carbohydrates and vegetables and protein and all that. And then, yeah. And I mean, in terms of learning about it, I think I just, seeing the bits that I had seen my mom, my dad do in the kitchen kind of stuck with me. My grandparents in Poland, my grandmother in Poland, watching them cook. I was always very fond of flipping through cookbooks and watching cooking shows and that too. So it came to me from all areas, really.
So yeah, you just picked it up as you went along kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, like I say, I guess, yeah, it always gives me wonder as to how or why certain people are drawn to the kitchen. Others are completely, averse to it. I think it's important for everyone to have some understanding of how to kind of work in the kitchen. But it's funny how some are just really into it. And then some are, people that, oh, I don't cook at all. I'm like, how can you not cook at all? You eat every day, which, it's fine. There's certain people that have different strengths and certain people that prefer to not have those strengths or whatever. But yeah, cooking's always fascinated me though. Cooking and eating too. I mean, I love food. That's probably why I like to be in the kitchen so much, because I get to have that control and, prepare the food that I kind of personally enjoy. Although I love to be cooked for too. And I love to go out to eat as well. Like I love to be wined and dined for sure. But for some reason, I just, I'm also very happy just creating meals and coming up with them and different ideas and that. So yeah, love the kitchen.
How do you come up with ideas? Because this is something that I think a lot of people are challenged with. Like, this eternal question of, oh, what are we cooking today? So how do you come up with ideas?
So I would say the first place, I think, is just what do I already have in my kitchen? You know, what's already at home? And that is basically always my starting point. You know, sometimes I'll have a strong craving or an urge for something in particular that I'd want to eat, which maybe that's what people are sometimes looking for and how they want to approach cooking. But for me, the easiest way for me to, you know, answer the question, what's for dinner, is what's in the fridge, you know, because, because that'll give you your answer most of the time. You know, and if there's nothing in the fridge, which there's always got to be something, even if it's like a, you know, wilting carrot or whatever, or shriveling carrot, it'll spark some inspiration. Or there's always, you know, the pantry as well. But yeah, I tend to look in the fridge and see what's there. And, you know, first what's going off, or what looks like it's on its last legs. That stuff definitely has to be used up first. Or what is there in abundance of too, you know, like for example, if I bought, you know, a couple of heads of cauliflower or something because they were on special the other day, then I'll most likely probably prepare something with that in it. So yeah, that's typically how I go about it. So there's, you know, sometimes like just knowing that I have wilting cilantro in the fridge will mean, okay, I'm having either Mexican or Asian tonight, you know, and it doesn't matter what kind of protein or whatever other vegetables I have in the fridge. I know that I can match any of that to, say, the cilantro. You know, it's helpful too if I'm leaning more towards the Mexican, I'll hope that I have an avocado in there, because I can't really have Mexican without avocado. And then, you know, certain little things like that. Like I'll think of what's in the fridge already. And then typically that ingredient will lean towards a certain cuisine, right? You know, like there's some things that are just very versatile, of course, that will, you know, if you have onions, you can make anything. So that's good. But yes, that's the way my brain works. I don't know if you do something similar or not, but like, that's just kind of, it's a systematic, automatic way of how I go about it. And I kind of like it. I kind of like that it's like a game too, you know? And we talk about leftovers too all the time, right? Like if I've got a little container of, say, some beef stew in the fridge or whatever, and, you know, maybe it's not enough to feed all four of us, but there's just a little bit of it that I know I can say, like, I do this like magic expansion thing, and I'll chop up, you know, extra vegetables, start cooking them off, and maybe some other kind of meat, or bacon is a fantastic thing to, say, you know, add some extra flavor or versatility to a meal that would otherwise be completely flat and boring. Like if you just have, say, cabbage and carrots, you know, gosh, toss some bacon in there and it's amazing. So yeah, I just kind of, I like to play around with it. I use that, I guess, the kind of idea like you often talk about, like just the principles behind it and some kind of formula, and starting with what I've got in the fridge and build it up from there, kind of thing. So,
but although you describe a sort of very, let's see what we have in the fridge today, you also, I think you do some meal planning as well, don't you? So how do you combine that sort of off the cuff improvising with meal planning that, you know, most people, including me, kind of think about in a sort of very kind of rigid way?
Exactly. So that's why I call my meal planning like meal planning for B-type personalities, because I would definitely not describe myself as the rigid kind of more disciplined A-type style of meal planning. You know, I would never, for example, like look at the calendar and say, okay, you know, Monday I'm having beef stroganoff, Tuesday it's lasagna, Wednesday it's this. Like, first of all, I'd never make meals like that to begin with. It's just, unless it's something very special happening. The way I go about it is like my meal planning, I like it to be very flexible. But what I do is I'll start just with what I described. I'll look in the fridge and see what I have, and I'll plan in advance, more or less, to think ahead of time as to what I've got in the fridge that I know I need to use up earlier. And, you know, the way I run my meal planning workshops, encourage the idea of, you do what works best for you. And for me personally, I know that I could never really fill in, or it's very challenging for me to fill in, like say, Monday to Friday or Monday to Saturday meals. I'll just do it every couple of days, for example. And I don't write down necessarily the full thing that I'll make. I mark down the things that I know that I need to use in advance. So, which allows for that flexibility, but it also just helps me know, like it takes it out of my brain, for example, so that because I can always, every time you open the fridge, you think to yourself, oh, I got to use up, that celery, or, oh my gosh, those mushrooms, they need to, they're going slimy. I need to do something with them tonight. That's why my meal planning approach helps that. I don't necessarily need to decide exactly what I'm making, but I put down, Monday night mushrooms and celery or whatever. And then I can go on with my day, and kind of in the background, when I have lulls through the day, I'm like, certain ideas will come to my mind. And I'll think like, oh, I can do something, I haven't had barley in a while or something like that. And I'll think, oh, mushroom barley soup. Oh my God, It also helps me to keep in mind certain things that, say, you have like in the back of your pantry. Like I love to buy things like sun-dried tomatoes and like all these like flavor bomb enhancers and stuff. But I don't know about you. Sometimes they get forgotten about, and they start collecting dust in the pantry and stuff. So whereas if I know, say, I bought like an aubergine or eggplant, as we call it here, then I'll put that down on, say, my meal plan, and then it'll spark that thing in my head of like, oh, I've got that stuff in the pantry that I know that would go really well with that, say like capers or anchovies or whatever stuff that I wouldn't think to use if I just, for example, am confronted with the moment of it's dinner time now and I have to quickly put something together. Then that stuff carries on sitting in the pantry, if you know what I mean. Like that's kind of how my brain tends to work. If I can get it out of my head onto paper, then it allows for other things to come to me that make dinner like a bit more flavorful and enjoyable. And, and the main part of it is that the decision has been made in advance. I know I need to do something with those mushrooms, that celery or whatever. And then I can play with it from there. So
yeah, I like that. I like this idea of the ingredients sort of percolating and the inspiration sort of coming throughout the day. I mean, I usually just sort of open the fridge and try to have an idea there and then.
Which that can work too. And I do that still very often, like I'm not this diligent, like for example, right now my life is kind of, it's very different for me right now. So I'm not sitting doing my usual routine of the meal planning. One thing we have to accept too, that it does take a little bit of time, and it is a bit, it would be unfamiliar to do it if you're doing it for the first time. Because it does take a minute of like sitting down. I for my workshops, I provide everybody with like a template, for example, that you can work with that's full of different prompts too, that are helping you to create a somewhat plan for your meals for the week or for the next few days. And, it feels a bit foreign at first because it does require you to take that, call it that additional step in the beginning, intentionally look at your fridge, kind of rummage around, it takes a bit of effort in that, but it feels so good and so satisfying than, what I typically tend to do, which, like you say, is just, okay, it's dinner time. Let's look through it. And, I feel like you're maybe a bit more creative and inventive in the kitchen, or you own a beautiful whole food shop full of wonderful spices and herbs and that. So you're you must be just full of inspiration all the time. For me, it's like, okay, looking after my girls and that, I do fall on the same thing all the time. I fall into the rut thing often,
Yeah, but
and
I think all of us do in a way, because, I mean, I get tired too, and I need to make quick dinner. And I think I fall into these sort of phases. There will be a phase where I'm putting soy sauce on everything. And then there's another phase where I'm putting, I don't know, sun-dried tomatoes or olives into everything. And, I have like the fenugreek powder phase or the cinnamon phase or whatever. So tend to kind of falling in and out of love with various ingredients. So I think I don't think I'm this sort of genius person whipping up, crazy ideas all the time. I'm just, I'm just making dinner, really.
Yeah. I think about that all the time, like what we kind of perceive to be a rut. For example, if we're leaning on, say, olives for a good amount of days, in a row or whatever, it's probably just because that's what we have in the fridge and they need to be used up too. Like, I'm learning to accept that. I'm like, no, this is not a rut. This is all like a lot of self-talk too. We got to tell ourselves, like, if I don't eat these in the next, for the next few days, then you just don't want things going off. Or I think the phases are great, like it's just, if you think back, this is another way I think of it and justify it in my head, as we've evolved as humans. There were, the rut was the typical thing we would have to go through because we would live by whatever was, ripe at the moment, or whatever we have maybe just hunted, and it was just eating, elk for the next couple of weeks or whatever, right? And that was it. There was a conversation I had with my husband, like very early on in our relationship, and he was trying to kind of insist on this idea of, okay, we need to have things changing up all the time. Our meals, like it has to be, the dinners shouldn't replicate or whatever after. And I still agree to that. But I remember in the conversation, I'm like, well, you can't be reinventing the wheel every single day, like that. First of all, it takes too much mental power. And second, the food needs to be eaten. Like I know you and I, we have our tricks as to how to kind of modify, or I call it like upgrading meals or upcycling meals to give them some variety. And that seems to work very well for us. But like the substance of it is technically the same, and I think we all need to just get over it and just eat the same thing for a few days in a row, or even weeks in a row, or maybe even for a full season, because it will change eventually when the next thing is in season, like tomatoes, when I'm harvesting tomatoes end of summer, like I'm just devouring them at every meal. And I'm saying, you know what, in a few months, they're going to be gone. So I better enjoy this now and enjoy the tomato sandwich and the tomato salad and the tomato soup, And yeah, like I think it's just, again, it's a self-talk and a talk in our culture maybe that we have, that we need to just have so much variety, rather than kind of keeping the rut as the problem. Let's just embrace it. And, like I say, we can throw in our tips and tricks on how to obviously throw in some kind of variety and interest through each day, adding, different herbs or the different spices or whatever. But the substance of the meal, I think, is important for us to kind of just, accept.
Yeah, well, and I think that with those little kind of flavor tricks, I mean, the same tomato sauce could be an Italian pasta sauce, or it could be a curry, or it could be a Mexican chili, or it could be, all these different things. It's still cooked tomatoes.
Mm-hmm.
You just changing up the flavorings. And I find this is a really easy way to add variety without reinventing the wheel. And to also, as you were mentioning earlier, to use up leftovers. So you have that portion of tomato soup or beef stewed in tomatoes, and it's not enough for a whole meal. So, I will, like you, throw in some vegetables, or throw in some greens, or a can of chickpeas or whatever. And there you go with a meal that is similar, but kind of not really.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly the same. I'll use, the bits, the leftovers, bulk it up, and suddenly it's, the essence is essentially the same, but you're still enjoying a different flavor and eating experience ultimately. So I love it. I think it's a great way to approach meals. And like I say, I play with it. I have fun just kind of coming up with the new combinations of things and concoctions and all this stuff. So as long as the family eats it, that's my main goal, is that, everyone just gets fed. I think also that's another thing too. We get kind of hung up on that. Everything needs to be like, 5-star, perfectly created, in that, like, the ultimate goal is nourishment. And I don't want to get too hung up on how perfect everything is, or, as we both are on the same page, it doesn't follow any particular predefined recipe. It's just a matter of, does this have enough, nourishment that will feed everybody? And that's it. And then dinner's done. Then on to the next meal or catastrophe we need to deal with in life.
So do you actually get those days where you either can't be bothered to cook, or you're too tired to cook, or you really don't have time to cook? So do you have like emergency meals that you make when
Yeah.
there isn't actually, it's not
Yeah.
a day that's sort of calling for cooking?
I don't know. I might sound very strange and weird to people. It's so hard for, like I was saying, I love eating out, and I'm definitely happy to lean on, like, ordering in or going out for a meal if I just definitely don't feel like it. But I'm also quite I don't know, frugal type person. And I will do like my ultimate best to really resist that, going that route. When, again, if I know that I've got food in the fridge or certain things that I can use, I'll find a way to make something out of nothing. Yeah, even my husband will say, "Soph, it's okay, let's go out." I'm like, no, I can do something here. I don't know why I have that in me. I guess my easiest meal that I'll lean on is potatoes and eggs. For me, I just feel like that is just the simplest thing, Like, we don't eat a lot of pasta in the house. If I was more into pasta, that would probably be it, That would be my leaning on kind of backup meal. But I'd say potatoes and eggs are just so easy because, one, if you roast them, it's very simple and they're extremely tasty. It's almost like, French fries. Just cube them up with olive oil, salt, pepper, and some garlic powder. I mean, and then, 45 minutes later, you have nice golden potatoes, and then frying up some, sunny side or over easy eggs. And then you dip the potatoes in there. It's kind of like, breakfast for dinner kind of thing. So, and that works. And then I'll just slice up some cucumbers or tomato slices. And that's my favorite leaning on meal. And I really would love to just pass that on to people, like as a go-to meal to have, because really there's no excuse, like unless you're sick in bed, like, with stomach flu or something, that you can't make a meal. Like, you can make that meal. Anybody can make that meal. Like, it's very, very simple. But yeah, if I'm feeling too lazy for that, then I would say pasta would be a thing that I would lean on. And that would be, again, I can't even buy pre-made sauces or anything like that. So like, I'll use it, I'll chop up an onion, some garlic, some herbs, a tin of tomatoes, and just like, a simple marinara sauce on noodles or something like that.
I often think that it is really so easy to make a simple tomato sauce that is going to be more tasty than something from a jar. Yeah. And as you said, often maybe we tell ourselves that either it has to be a big production or we'll get the takeout, where, it doesn't have to be a big production. And, potatoes and eggs is one of my favorites too, or potatoes and tinned fish.
Oh, okay.
And then, and then something vegetable could be just sauerkraut from the jar, frozen peas,
couple pickles,
slice up tomatoes,
yeah,
as you say.
Or I tend to have always like a container of leftover coleslaw. Like, we eat a lot of cabbage in our house. I make a lot of coleslaw very often, which is a good substantial kind of vegetable to have on hand all the time that stores well. So some coleslaw with, like I say, roast potatoes and eggs. I mean, it's such a great combination of different textures and flavors and that. So yeah, it's very hard for me to be too tired to cook when I have this mentality about it. I think that's the thing.
Yeah. And to see that, really, there is nothing wrong with really simple meals. That is still a proper meal, with your potatoes and eggs and some sort of vegetable. You have everything you need. This is a nourishing meal.
Yes.
So that was like the pared down emergency version. So what is your favorite thing to cook and to eat when you kind of push the boat out, or something special?
Oh, okay. That's a fun question. Like, the thing, okay, I'll say what I cook most often which takes a bit more effort than, say, potatoes and eggs. So I typically go on rotation in the household, but I'll do like a weekly pork roast, pork shoulder, and just, do like a dry rub seasoning for it and slow cook that. And then that gives me pulled pork that we can eat for a couple of days after that. And I, transform those leftovers into great other dishes. And then I'll do typically like, if it's like winter, fall time, I'm obviously roasting more or baking things in the oven. So I'll do like a sheet pan kind of like roast chicken, thighs and legs, because for us, they seem to have the most flavor, the dark meat, and then the skin, the crispy skin. And that we always love to do that. And then, I'll do some ground beef also too on a weekly rotation. I've been getting into some ground beef. I've been getting into making like stir fries with ground beef too, which I not long ago realized ground beef is a great medium for making stir fry. It doesn't always have to be like thin beef strips or anything like that, which is in my head. Again, self-talk. We think that certain things have to be a certain way. And then you get over it and it's like, wow, the world opens up and you have way more options and life gets easier. So all these things are just our typical things. They don't take me a ton of time to make them. And to be honest, I love them. I think my favorite thing to make and eat, which is also easy and simple, I'd say is the Mexican. I think I really love leaning on Mexican flavors. Like again, with the pulled pork, with that leftover, I just add, like I'll fry up the pulled pork again and add chili powder to it, some, saute onions with it and that. And then that's a good base on, say, like a tortilla, or even get pitas sometimes. I would love to make my own, but the pita bread sometimes just I'll fall back on that because that seems to have better ingredients in there. And then, that with like a guacamole, some of that leftover coleslaw, like I say, I always have some hot sauce I put on there, maybe some cheese if we have it in the house, because we don't eat a lot of dairy in this house, but oh, and then cilantro, of course. Just sprinkle some cilantro, maybe some salsa if I have it. Or if not salsa, I just chop tomatoes. Again, like it doesn't have to be specifically these things. Like chopped tomatoes do the basis of salsa. So you can just do that. So Mexican would be my favorite thing probably to make and eat. I would love to explore more with doing things with pastries and more kind of maybe French style stuff. I would love to make pasta from scratch as well. But because we're like a low carb household that lean on more meat protein and low carb veggies, I don't get a chance to play around with that stuff often. But I feel as my girls get older and that, I'm looking forward to kind of making those more complicated meals, or like, as you put it, normally, I think those meals that require more steps, Right now, I'm just totally into the whole like one pot, one sheet pan kind of meals. But I would like to do things like making more like lasagnas and stuff like that. That would be fun.
Go to great lengths to make sure you're cooking at home, and you're also helping people with your meal planning workshops to, make cooking easier for themselves, just like I do. Everything I do is I want people to realize that cooking can be easy, or as I like saying, it's not rocket science, it's just dinner. So why are you thinking that cooking is so important? Why is it so important for you?
Well, I guess because how I said earlier in the conversation, it's just everyone eats. Every creature on the planet, and us as humans, we eat typically, 3 meals a day. So if you're not cooking, then I don't know how you're nourishing yourself. And what I hear in the noise in our culture is that a lot of people either don't like to cook or they prefer not to cook. So I don't know how they're feeding themselves as much as they need to be if they're not feeling that comfortable in the kitchen. So I'm in the same mission as you are, is just to kind of, simplify things a little bit in the kitchen. And the best way I see about, going about that is the way you approach it. And that's how we found each other, right? I think I had just searched the hashtag intuitive cooking on Instagram and you came up and I'm like, yes, finally, person I've been looking for, because I've been cooking this way forever, but I didn't have it in me to figure out how to explain the way to do it. And you've done it so well. I love how you put it out in your principles and the concepts and your cheat sheets and formulas and things that you do. For me, my kind of contribution, I feel like, that I want to add is that showing people how to make the time for it, because that tends to be a big excuse or a big thing. And I mean, you and I also say, like, yeah, there are some days where you just don't have the time to fit in preparing a meal. Like sometimes the thing that takes the most time, though, I think, is that thinking of what it is you're going to make, right? So that's why I've jumped on the whole meal planning bandwagon, because what I'm trying to do is offer people or help support people in creating that space and time to make those decisions in advance by giving those kind of prompts and inspiration, leaning on these very simple things. Open your fridge, see what needs to be used. Okay. And then even if you can't think of the meal in the moment, you're at least creating that space between now and dinner time, or something might pop into your head. And then complement that with your approach and how you teach people, where you can kind of get to that moment and you can allow for that off the cuff approach, that intuitive approach. I think a big thing people have, like this aversion to meal planning, is like, you can plan the day away, you could plan the week. But by the time Friday comes, who knows, it may not feel like having, I don't know, schnitzel or noodles with beef or whatever. Like, you may not feel like it. So that's why me wanting to help support people in providing a flexible, welcoming meal planning approach gives people that opportunity to make that time for it, but to also allow for flexibility to allow it to change and transform into what it needs to be when dinner time is actually there facing you head on. And it's like, okay, what are we going to do? So yeah, I don't know if I answered your question, which is cool.
And now, my kitchen friends, it's time for a quick break to see what I've been cooking up for you. If you ever feel trapped by recipes or wish you could get more creative in your kitchen, I made a free mini course. It's called Ditch the Recipes, and it's a short series of 5 emails that will help you get started on your intuitive cooking journey. Sign up on the website at theintuitivecook.co.uk/free or find the link in the show notes. And now, let's get back to our conversation. I find that another thing that people are very often getting stuck with is that fear of ruining it. That fear of the epic kitchen fail. Have you ever had an epic kitchen fail yourself?
Okay, certain things that I have done and will do sometimes. I know that I oversalt things sometimes, and it is challenging to rectify that. and then I've kind of burnt things, like I would made this like cabbage stew a while ago, and it was my pot. It's not great. It's like this very thin stainless steel, and it just burnt on the bottom. And then that smoky burntness kind of went through the whole stew. And with the amount of meals that I actually make every single day, I'd say I have a pretty good, statistically, things work out okay in the fridge, but I mean, in the kitchen. Oh, and I've forgotten ribs on the barbecue that totally charred the meat. So that was pretty difficult to rectify. The worst for me is really when I ruin meat, because that's an expensive thing. I see it as a real sacred thing. This was a living animal. So I hate when I ruin meat, for example. But luckily that day I had some sausages in the fridge, so I just threw those on the barbecue and managed to just have that as a backup. Like the ribs were really hard to kind of save. Although my husband kind of was like pretty adamant, and he scraped off as much as he could. And then, even that, you could scrape off the burnt thing and then maybe just use the bones and make a soup out of them or something like that. Could kind of still save something from there. I don't know, for people that kind of worry about that and worry about ruining dinner or ruining the meal, it's like, again, I think just trying to aim at making things edible enough just to feed everybody, and also too accepting sometimes things don't work out, and then just have a backup thing in the background.
But, really, if you think about, you just mentioned 3 occasions of something going, very wrong, but you are cooking pretty much 350 plus days a year for years. So this kind of idea that every little misstep might ruin your dinner, I think it's not true. I think it's a myth. I think cooking is actually very forgiving. Not when you're aiming for perfection, but when you're aiming for, a perfectly tasty meal. It's very difficult to make something not edible.
Yeah, that's true. And especially if you're doing it every day and you're, building up that practice every single day. And I mean, even if it does turn out like you say, the overall track record is going to work out in your favor because we eat so often that you're always going to have more better meals than you are failures, especially if you keep practicing. And I mean, I don't know if that is kind of putting people off from attempting more in the kitchen. I think, again, it's a matter of just getting over it and maybe have, some sandwich bread as a backup in case anything happens. I always get nervous about wasting or having to throw away something, but I have a good compost pile that requires things to be put in there. And if something doesn't work out, then it goes there and then feeds the soil and then it all comes back into the loop. So I try to see it in a positive way in that sense. And like I say, the hardest thing for me to just kind of part with is meat. But even that, you can make smoky soup flavored broth with bones or whatever from things that you may have barbecued over, a bit too crispy or whatever. But there's definitely ways to save things. Like, for example, one thing I have done is the over-salted coleslaw. So I could also just maybe shred some more cabbage and then add it to the made coleslaw and then bulk it up. And then I'll have actually leftovers, and that could work out into an actual really positive thing because then I'll have extra leftovers for the week and then I need to cook less later. Yeah, that's the great thing about the kitchen. I don't know, people kind of put the whole homemaking and caretaking role of the household in such a low position, but we have to be on it all the time, our brain needs to be working all the time, figuring out, what to do, what to make, how to fix it if it, goes wrong. Yeah, there's so much space to be creative. And then we have, when you're finding yourself in those moments of, lack of inspiration or whatever, then we have, 50 trillion cookbooks out there that you just need to open one and get some inspiration that way. And I think, that's a good cookbook idea, how to save, failures.
Yeah.
Certain things that have gone wrong in the kitchen.
I wonder if there's a whole book about that there. There's certainly chapters and blog posts and things like that. Yeah. So what's your relationship with cookbooks then?
Okay. So we're currently building our home right now. And I have been resisting collecting the amount of cookbooks that I should actually be in ownership of by now at this point in my life. But it's just, we've been doing the tiny living thing for so long and kind of I'd traveled and everything. So I haven't really created the library of cookbooks that I'm really hoping for, but that's going to change soon once the house is done. And I can't wait for my whole library of all the books that I want to be in possession of. So, but one thing actually, when I did travel, so I went to, when I was in university, I did an exchange program. And so I lived abroad and I traveled a bit while I lived abroad in Europe. And I decided as a fun little nostalgic thing, every country that I would travel to, I would buy a cookbook from that place as a little memento, Got to find that somewhere. That's got to be in my dad's basement or something like that. Somewhere I've kept it in storage. But yeah, you talk about food memories all the time. They're so important. They're so special for us. Some of our greatest memories probably involve meals and eating something special in that. So definitely part of my travels was going to experience all the different meals and cuisine that I was, not used to in that. So those are great memories. But yeah, in terms of cookbooks, I don't know. I mean, I was gifted a bunch actually from a friend, which I loved kind of displaying in my home. There's only like 2 or 3 of them, but like things like Smitten Kitchen is always a good one to flip through. I always love the cookbooks that have pictures in them for sure that, you can see. Although, like I've just told you recently, I just stumbled upon that book by, is it Tamar Adler is her name? That Everlasting Meal, which is not a cookbook per se, even though it has some little recipes in there, but it's more of the approach to cooking, the more philosophy behind it that is, I think, also very important for a lot of people to kind of tune into. It's great.
So you just mentioned all these wonderful food memories and memorable meals. Do you want to share one with us of one of your memorable meals?
Okay. So, I mean, any of my, from childhood, I would say probably being in Poland where my father's from, my mom's parents are both Polish too, but so my heritage is Polish, but we would go and visit family in Poland. And I would say probably eating over there was, very memorable for me. I remember even, going to my grandmother's garden. She had an allotment there in the back behind her building and picking, fresh vegetables and that, like they would harvest their own potatoes. I remember they were just so floury. They're the best potatoes I'd ever eaten for sure. Like they're just perfect. And thinking back to, I remember just recently it dawned on me, oh my gosh, my grandmother there in Poland would make like potatoes and fried eggs. I remember eating that meal there. And I bet that was a meal she leaned on when she had no idea what to cook or anything without, communicating with it. It just dawned on me like just in the last couple of weeks, I think, thinking about it. So that was probably a meal she leaned on as well. Definitely her, the fermented pickles and homemade sauerkraut and those kinds of my old Polish roots. Those meals are definitely in the food memories. Most recently, though, I think it was my husband's 40th birthday, and I remember we had a couple friends over, and I had made like grilled shrimp or prawns on the barbecue, and then I made like a Thai curry or something or some noodles. You know what? I don't even remember exactly what I ate, but I just remember all of us enjoying it so much. We were eating outside. It was such a gorgeous day. It was so beautiful. And everyone was just like, wow, this is so good, this food, And then I made an orange almond cake for dessert, and it just complemented the meal so well. Like everything just flowed together so nice. Like I said, the combination of just being outside and this amazing day and with good friends, and yeah, that was good. And then, Indian meals, eating out in London, all the curries over there. Like it just, I could go on a lot about great food memories. It's just.
But it's also interesting to find that so often, my own memories too, how the food and the experience, the context, the people we shared it with, the day, eating outside or eating in a certain place on a travel, all this is so intertwined. You can't just take out the food. It's all the experience. It's not about the food, it's about the experience. And if you made that exact same orange almond cake again, it would be a different experience and it wouldn't taste the same. So we have this idea that we can repeat a meal if we just followed the recipe again exactly, but we can't, because next time we make it, everything is different. We are different.
That's why I love my work as a holistic health coach, because, people I find tend to focus on, okay, what should I be eating that's healthy for me? What amount of nutrients do I need? What macronutrients? What's the, combination of these things? And speaking more in mathematical terms as to what they should be consuming. Whereas it's like, well, it's not just about the food. It's how are you eating it? Where are you eating it? Who are you with? What time of day is it? It's like, it's the holistic experience. I was just listening to this great podcast episode this morning about how, let me see if I can get this right. People tend to actually live longer. Yeah, they add more years to their life by eating candy, say 2 or 3 times a month, rather than abstaining from it entirely. Like, it's okay, everyone, like allow yourself, that's different though than eating, say, 1 or 2, 3 candies a day, but doing it 1 to 3 times a month, say on like, a birthday celebration or Valentine's Day, like the problem is I think we've just normalized so much this excessive processed foods in our diets. And so that's why people just are like, okay, what do I need to eat that's healthy? It's like, well, we have to like reframe the whole conversation. It's like, okay, yes, you need to eat healthy things, but also eat the naughty things in the right context, and not excessively. I go on about the blue zones and everything like that, like alcohol, coffee. They may not necessarily be bad. It's just the way you consume these things and the frequency and all that. It's more holistic than people want it to just be like, math, like the calories. Okay, so many calories in, so many calories out. Like that's not how life works. So it's a whole picture.
It's a whole picture, and how we do things, as you just said, is just as important as what we do or what we eat. So yeah, I totally agree with that. There is a lot more to a good life than a list of nutrients, and this is why all these nutrition studies that will say, I don't know, coffee is bad for you, coffee is good for you, alcohol is bad or good, tomatoes are good, tomatoes are bad, all this stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, it can't possibly be black and white, and the context is just as important, and the context is different for everyone. So yeah.
Exactly. And well, that's just, as we've talked about previously before, I know that we wanted to kind of mention this, is that this focus on all the specific nutrients and things that we should all be consuming. That's, partly why I did my health coach training, to be more aware and understanding of what is the right amount of, all the micronutrients and the macronutrients to eat. But at the end of the day, what matters is that you know how to prepare your food in a way that you will eat it and, enjoy it somewhat enough just to allow it to nourish you. And yeah, that's the important thing. Like, I know that there's many people across the planet that could live a whole healthy life without ever knowing what amount of magnesium or iron or zinc they consumed in the day. But they live very healthily because, first of all, they prepared the food themselves from whole ingredients. And they probably ate it in a way that was holistically, most healthy for them. And that it included probably eating with others communally, or, maybe eating outside and stuff like that. We make that a priority in our home too. When it's nice weather, we're outside eating as many meals as we can. I don't know. I think meals are just such a great opportunity to have a little special celebration every day,
Well, and I think in our house it is that sitting down to dinner is the highlight of the day. This definitely is the best part of the day, sharing dinner. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So to bring this full circle and to a close, do you have a couple of favorite tips or hacks that you're using that make cooking easy for you or tastier for you, that other people might benefit from knowing your tricks?
Yes. So for me, I definitely, when I'm preparing food for a meal, whether it's lunch or dinner, I will always overcook. Sometimes I don't know why people don't all do this, but I think this is a big key in order to be able to cook more often for yourself with less stress. Because when you kind of automatically get into the batch cooking mode, then you cook once, eat twice, or 3 times or 4 is my motto. Like I say, I'll do a roast pork shoulder so that I have food that will last us for a few days. I'll make a big bowl of coleslaw so that I have some fresh kind of salad veg thing on the side for a few more meals. So always cooking extra more than I need to, then, because if you're there taking the time to prepare food, you might as well prepare a whole bunch, because we're all the same. Like no one feels like, standing and chopping vegetables for hours and stuff. So, but when you have to go and do it, you might as well do it a whole bunch in one go, and then it's out of the way. So that's definitely something. And then, we talk about having magic sauce always and stuff. I always like to have some kind of pre-mixed olive oil, some chopped garlic or lemon juice and salt and that in the fridge to have that ready as like a drizzle, or even like, if I'm making a quick guacamole, I'll smash up the avocados, and then I already have like, a garlicky infused olive oil that I can add to the avocado, and you've got flavor injection instantaneously. Either that, or I also have been getting into the routine of making a pre-mixed like herb or spice mix, kind of like like your own homemade Cajun spice mix I like to do. So I mix the spices that I like. It's like garlic powder, salt, cumin, paprika, maybe some oregano, and then, sprinkling that on top of, say, scrambled eggs, or any kind of eggs, fried eggs, just to add a little bit of excitement on the plate. Sprinkle that over anything, roast veg or meats for that matter. Anyways, a very versatile kind of herb spice mix, I think, is really great to have under your belt as like a special superpower you can have to make meals just that little bit extra interesting.
Yeah, I like that.
So.
And to have it, already prepared in a jar, so you don't have to think about what to add. And it always works. We are so often afraid of adding the wrong spice, but actually, just add what you like and it will be fine.
Yeah.
Yes, it will work.
It'll work.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's a nice place to bring this to a close. So thank you for that conversation, Sophia.
Thank you for having me. It's really nice chatting with you, as
definitely.
always.
So I'll see you soon.
See you soon.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of At Home with the Intuitive Cook. Check out the show notes for links and tasty morsels. And remember, fresh episodes are served up every other Friday. Subscribe to stay tuned and keep exploring the joys of everyday cooking. Until next time, stay curious, trust your taste, and don't forget, it's not rocket science, it's just dinner.